I'm Vanessa, 34 years old, and despite 7 years of marriage to Gregory, I've always felt like a stranger in your family last summer at your annual barbecue. I hoped things would finally be different. Gregory's sister, Amanda, had other plans as everyone gathered around the picnic table. I tried to share news about my graphic design work. Amanda interrupted with a sly smile. If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would notice. That the table erupted in laughter until Gregory, I just lifted my hot dog, locked eyes with her and said, "Dear, I accept." I moved that night. If you're enjoying this story, fall by now a comment letting me know where you're watching. Hit like and subscribe to hear what happened when I reappeared a year later. Gregory and I met during our senior year at the university. I was attending graphic design while working part-time at a local coffee shop to pay for tuition. He was completing his business degree fully funded by his parents. We connected when he came over for a late-night study session and started chatting about the book I was reading behind the counter. Our novel was a whirlwind. Within 3 months, we were inseparable. By graduation, he proposed with a ring that cost more than mine. All the student debt. I was swept away by your charm, intelligence, and what I perceived as genuine love. When we got married a year later, I thought I was entering not only into a partnership, but into a new family. The Caldwells were everything. My family wasn't rich, well-connected, and united in his own particular way. Richard Gregory's father built a successful marketing company from the start. Patricia, his mother, managed his social calendar with military personnel accuracy while serving on 3 boards of charity. Amanda, his sister, followed in his father's footsteps. He was already a junior executive in his company at the age of 27. Michael, the younger brother, was the rebel of the family who still got a cushy job at his uncle's investment firm. My own background couldn't have been more different. Raised by a single mom who worked 2 jobs, I grew up in understanding the value of a dollar and the dignity of hard work. My sister Olivia and I shared a room until I left for college. Vacations meant homey gifts and dinners with neighbors. When I first visited Caldwell's sprawling colonial home, I felt as if I had stepped onto a movie set. Class differences were subtle but persistent. Patricia praised my crafty design work as if it were a cute hobby instead of my own profession. Richard would explain business basics to me at dinner. Even though I ran my own freelancer business for years before meeting Gregory, Amanda would correct my pronunciation of wine varieties or designer names, always with a sugary smile. "They mean well," Gregory would say whenever I mentioned these microaggressions. "Amanda is just trying to help him fit in. That's how she shows love." But Amanda's love felt more like a slow poison in our marriage. She gave a bridesmaid speech that included several stories about Gregory's ex-girlfriends. When we announced that we were buying our first home, she questioned whether the neighborhood was really the right fit for a Caldwell. When I got a major client, she wondered aloud if they hired me because of Gregory's family connections. Despite that, I tried to volunteer for Patricia's charity events, that I referred clients to Richard's company reminded me of everyone's birthdays with thoughtful gifts. I laughed at their inside jokes, even when they poked me. I dressed differently for family gatherings, adopted their vernacular, and swallowed up my working class pride as conversations turned to vacation homes and boarding schools for the first few years. I maintained my freelance design business. Building a Gregory received a modest list of clients and gaining some recognition in local circles. So Gregory was given the opportunity to expand his division of labor if he was willing to travel extensively without discussion. Was to I assumed I would. Cut back on my career to manage our home life. My business dwindled for a few loyal customers while I became increasingly isolated. My world narrowing to Gregory's intermittent presence and the judgment of his family orbit. Last spring, I miscarried at 11 weeks. The physical pain was unbearable, but the emotional fallout was worse. Gregory was in Chicago for a conference. He offered to come home, but seemed relieved when I said I could manage. Patricia sent flowers with a note that said, "Maybe it's the best until you're more established." Amanda suggested that stress of trying to maintain her small business may have been a factor that only Olivia came to stay with me for a week, bringing homemade soup and sitting with me through tear-soaked nights. The contrast between her genuine care and the clinical distance from my in-laws broke something fundamental in me. But I buried it. It's more of a disappointment to swallow in the service of maintaining family harmony. When the annual summer BBQ rolled, I was a diminished version of myself. That my design work had it became mechanical. My friendships atrophied, and my marriage felt more and more like a performance. Even though I held a fragile hope that things could get better, that I could somehow win genuine acceptance from the family I married 7 years ago. Caldwell, the summer barbecue was a neighborhood institution. Patricia spent weeks planning the menu that Richard displayed his. I always knew I wasn't exactly the favorite at family gatherings. I laughed, smiled when it hurt, and told myself it didn't matter. But nothing could have prepared me for what I heard that day at the barbecue. While everyone else was playing and drinking, someone leaned over and said, "If you left now, no one would care." At first, I thought it was just another bad joke. But the way they smiled, the way others were silent, told me it wasn't. So I decided to test it. I got up, took my things, and left without saying a word. What happened next? Let's just say they were not as indifferent as they pretended to be. collection of grilling appliances, and dozens of family, friends, and business partners ground on their perfectly gramado bimquido was the event in which the family status was displayed and reinforced where loyalties were. Confirmed and strangers were identified, and despite my years of marriage to Gregory, the first remained firmly in the outsider category. On the morning of the barbecue, I spent 3 hours making my grandma's strawberry shortcake, the only dessert that received genuine rave reviews previous. Years, Gregory was busy on calls finalizing details for his next one on a business trip to Tokyo. When it was time to leave, he hurried me out the door, worried about being elegantly late versus really late. Remember Dad revealing his new imported smoker today? He reminded me as we drove around trying to take action, impressed. Even if you don't understand why it's a big deal, I nodded, holding my dessert holder in my lap, my sundress bought specifically to match Patricia's preferred casual. Elegance dress code. It already felt tight on my shoulders. Caldwell's house was buzzing with activity when we arrived. Vendors intertwined with groups of guests handing out appetizers. Richard was centered on the gay patio, surrounded by admiring friends as he demonstrated her new smoker. Patricia floated from cluster to cluster, her laugh tinkling like expensive crystal. Finally, Amanda screened, spotting us as we entered through the side gate. She kissed Gregory, then gave me a quick look at. Vanessa, that dress is so cheerful. The kitchen is getting crowded, but I'm sure you can find a place to put your contribution. She swept Gregory before I could answer, linking her arm to his and throwing in a story about meeting her college roommate. I stood alone with dessert in hand, scanning the yard for a friendly face. I made my way to the kitchen where Patricia was directing the catering team with precise instructions. "Oh, Vanessa, honey," she said, noticing me hovering in the door. "You didn't." "Have to bring anything. We got the pedicate treatment desserts." He gestured vaguely toward the pantry. "But how thoughtful, perhaps. Put it there for now." I put my cake on a shelf already full of other contributions from non-guests show-worthy when I came out of the kitchen. I heard Patricia instructing a waiter to make room for Amanda's authentic tiramisu in the center of the dessert table. For the next 2 hours passed in a blur of polite smiles and garbled conversations with whoever I started talking to. One of Gregory's cousins, only to have them pulled by Patricia to meet someone important that I volunteered to help set up the buffet line. But it was said that the caterers had a system that I tried to put together to one I talk about recent movies, but I couldn't say a word about Michael's wife. Charlotte received an entirely different treatment despite being married to a family member for only 2 years. Patricia proudly introduced her to everyone as our Charlotte. Pediatric surgeon Amanda included her in reminiscences about family vacations she couldn't have attended. Even Richard, who rarely engaged with in-laws, asked detailed questions about his work. The contrast it wasn't lost on me, nor was the irony that Charlotte seemed as uncomfortable with attention as I did with the lack of when it was lunchtime. Gregory reappeared by my side after spending the deep morning in conversation with his father's business partners. "Are you having fun?" he asked, Not waiting for an answer before guiding me toward the elaborate buffet line, we filled our plates and joined the main table on the patio I ended up sitting between. Gregory's elderly uncle, Frank, who was hard of hearing, and an open space for Amanda, who was still helping himself. Gregory sat down in front of me. Already absorbed in conversation with Richard about Japanese business etiquette, Amanda has finally arrived, your dish meticulously arranged and instantly turning heads with the anecdote about a celebrity she saw at her gym. Charlotte asked appropriate questions. Patricia smiled proudly until Frank shifted to hear her better during a brief lull. I saw my opportunity. I just finished a branding project for that new bakery downtown that I offered that they're having their opening next weekend. Amanda's eyes narrowed a bit. How nice it is that the place with the cheesy neon sign, I passed by it yesterday. The signage is really inspired by vintage. I explained that the owners wanted to pay homage to the history of the building, like one of the first if you disappeared tomorrow. Amanda interrupted with a theatrical sigh that no one would notice. That's how boring this conversation is. The table erupted in laughter. Patricia laughed behind his napkin. Richard gaffed until Gregory laughed, coming in for his beer. Frank, who probably hadn't heard the comment, joined him automatically. Tether sounds surrounded me like cold water, shocking my system. I felt simultaneously hyper-visible and completely invisible. My face burned, but my hands were cold in that moment. 7 years of accumulated lights crystallized in perfect clarity. Didn't cry, I didn't storm out, I. Didn't create a scene that would later be told as evidence of my emotional instability. Instead, I raised my hot dog in a mocking toast, met Amanda's gaze directly, and said clearly, challenge I accept. A brief, confused silence fell on the table. Amanda's smile faltered lightly. Gregory looked between us, sensing that something had changed, but unable to identify what. Patricia chirped, who's ready for Richard to carve the chest. And the moment passed. For the rest of the afternoon, I watched rather than participate. I watched how easily everyone moved through his world of assumed privileges and belongings. I noticed how Gregory blended seamlessly with his family while occasionally throwing me an absent smile. I cataloged every slight, every exclusion, every moment they spoke to me more or around. Most importantly, I heard the silence voice inside me that had been whispering for years, finally loud enough to hear that you deserve better than this. By the time we gathered our things to let, my decision was made. The only question left was how to implement it. The drive home from the barbecue stretched out in silence. Gregory checked emails on his phone, occasionally reading aloud. Excerpts about your trip to Tokyo. I looked out the window, mental calculations already running under my outside calm. When we got to our garage, he seemed to notice my unusual silence. All right, you've been gone since then lunch. I considered my words carefully. Amanda's joke about me disappearing made you think it was funny. Gregory sighed, unbuckling his seatbelt. Don't start with that again. Amanda was just being Amanda. You know how she looks at family gatherings. You laughed. I said it was simply a joke, Vanessa. Not everything needs to be analyzed to death. He got out of the car, effectively ending the conversation that night while Gregory slept beside me. I stared at the ceiling, repeating not only the day events, but the whole trajectory of our wedding. I thought of the brilliant and ambitious designer I was when we met. I remembered how I handled clients with trust, how passionate I was about my work, how deeply I connected friends. Somewhere along the way, I began to believe this subtle message the Caldwells were sending, that I was lucky to be among them, that my inclusion was conditional on my fulfillment, that my value was determined by their evaluation. I got out of bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and went to my home office. I opened my laptop and started methodically researching listings of apartments in Seattle, where Olivia lived. By dawn, I had a rudimentary plan that Gregory left for a morning golf game with Richard, kissing me absent-mindedly on his way out. The door the moment her car pulled away. I began to execute my plan with astonishing clarity. I first called Jessica, my college roommate, who remained loyal despite my growing isolation. I need a big favor, I said when she replied appointed. She replied without hesitation, I'm leaving Gregory today. Can you come and help me pack the essentials? 2 hours later, Jessica arrived with coffee, packing supplies, and fierce determination in his eyes. We work efficiently identifying what I really necessary versus what could be replaced. Clothes, personal documents, irreplaceable moments, and my design equipment took priority. I can store what I don't fit in your car at my home, Jessica offered, carefully wrapping a framed photo of my mom and I while Jessica organized the physical items. I handled with the financial separation. I transferred exactly half of our combined savings in my personal account. Not a penny more. Despite the temptation, I paid my share of the monthly bills that were due. I made a list of subscriptions and services to transfer or cancel. In the middle of the afternoon, my car was full with the distilled essence of my life. Jessica hugged me fiercely before getting into her own vehicle. Call me when you're settled for the night. And Vanessa, I'm proud of you. Alone in what had been ours at home for 5 years, I wrote a letter to Gregory. Kept things simple, stating that I needed some time to reevaluate our marriage. I explained that I had only taken what was indisputably mine and had contributed to pending accounts, that I asked for space and no contact. While sorting through my feelings, I didn't share my fate. As a final act, I took off my wedding ring and put it on top of the letter on the kitchen counter next to her. I left a copy of Amanda's cruel joke, written literally with the date and place medically noted, before leaving. I allowed myself a moment of sentimentality. I took our wedding photo on the table in the hallway. We seemed so happy, so full of possibility. Gregory's smile reached his eyes at that time. My own face shone with hope and confidence that I barely recognized. Now goodbye, I whispered, replacing the frame, and walk out the door without looking back. At the driving feeling away from our suburban neighborhood was terrifying and exhilarating with every mile marker. The grip on my chest loosened incrementally by the time I crossed the state line. I felt I could totally take a breath for the first time in years. I stayed in a modest hotel that night, using the credit card that I kept separately throughout our wedding. The room was simple but clean, nothing like the luxury accommodations the Caldwells considered standard. After confirming my safe arrival to Jessica and Olivia, I hung up my phone. Gregory would be home now, finding an empty closet and my letter. The thought brought neither satisfaction nor guilt, just a stranger numbness in the silent anonymity of the hotel room that I curled up under stranger blankets and fell into the deepest sleep I've had in months. Of the morning brought the first wave of messages when I briefly turned on my phone. Gregory's communications evolved just like me expected: confusion, then irritation, then worrying, then anger. Where are you calling me? This is ridiculous. Come home so we can talk. Your mother is worried. At least let her, she knows you're safe. You're being incredibly selfish. Now I have the trip to Tokyo in 3 days. Well, take your space. Let's talk when I return. Not once did he mention Amanda's joke or her laugh. Not once he recognized some understanding of why I might have left. Sent a summary text message to my mom assuring my safety, but requesting privacy. So I hung up my phone again and opened my laptop to look for long-term accommodations in Seattle. The challenge was accepted. Now came the hard part: disappearing, not only physically, but disentangling myself from the identity I built as the wife of Gregory Caldwell. I was about to find out if Amanda was right. If my absence would go completely unnoticed, or if I could rebuild a life where my presence mattered on my own terms. Seattle greeted me with 3 days of continuous rain, as if washing away my old life. Olivia had found me a month-by-month furnished apartment in your neighborhood. A small studio with bay windows and creaking floors. After the sprawling suburban home, Gregory and I shared the compact space that should have seemed claustrophobic. Instead, it felt a comfortable cocoon. The building is not. Fancy at all. Olivia apologized as she helped I carry my limited belongings, but the location is great and the owner doesn't ask many questions. It's perfect, I assured him, running my hand along the worn-out but solid kitchen counter. It's only mine. That the first week spent in a blur of practical arrangements. I opened a new bank account at a local credit union I set up, email forwarding through Jessica. Instead of leaving a direct trail, I bought a new phone with a Seattle area code. I created updated profiles on freelance design platforms, carefully curated my portfolio to remove Gregory's network-connected work, Gregory's messages. Continued the transition from anger to bargain. Whatever is going on, we can work through it. He wrote, just come home. I kept it my silence, not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. Every time I thought of the laughter around that picnic table, the years of subtle diminution, the gradual erosion of my identity. Amanda posted a passive-aggressive Instagram story 2 weeks later. My departing family is everything. You can't choose who stays and who goes. The heart emoji filled comments from various connections from Caldwell's mom, Gregory. I called my mother, expressing theatrical concern while fishing for information. Michael's wife, Charlotte, has sent a tentative text: if you want to talk, I'm here, and haven't responded to any of them. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. Jessica sent the remainder of my belongings in unmarked boxes. I found a therapist who specializes in family dynamics and marital trauma, scheduling weekly sessions that often left me emotionally drained, but incrementally. Stronger what Amanda said at the BBQ, that doctor. Luz commented on during our third session that was not the cause of your departure was the catalyst, the last straw. I agreed. Tell me about the first straw. She asked that question and locked a flood of subtle digging memories disguised as useful advice. Achievements. Minimized opinions, discarded while Gregory not malicious, but complicit in his quiet in the second month. I had secured 3 stable design clients, online platforms where the work was not particularly creative, especially formatting ebooks and designing social media templates, but paid the most important bills. Every completed project rebuilt my professional confidence. On a rainy Tuesday, I walked in a local coffee shop and noticed a stunning wall mural. The barista saw me admiring it. Gorgeous, right? The owner ordered it from a local artist. She explained while preparing my latte. She is looking for someone to redesigning our menus and promotional materials. In fact, an hour later, I was sitting with Eleanor. Marshall, the silver-haired 50-something owner, and a straightforward way that I immediately found it refreshing. I don't care about your resume, she said, nodding away from the portfolio I pulled up on my tablet. Show me your personal work, things you do because you can't not do it. I hesitated and sailed to one folder that I had barely opened in years. These were designs that I created for myself, experimental, sometimes impractical, but authentically mine. Eleanor studied them silently, occasionally zooming in on the you're hiding details. She finally said, looking up with sharp blue eyes, "These are good, very good, but not recent." I admitted that I haven't done a job like this in years. Why not ask the question? It was simple, but it hit like a physical blow that I found myself telling Eleanor a shortened version of my story, the creative passion I once had, the gradual sublimation of my style to fit the Caldwell aesthetic, the slow surrender of my artistic voice. Eleanor listened without interruption and nodded. When you were hired for the menu project, but in a conditioning, what it is that you make a personal piece, something purely yours every week. Bring it when we meet. I don't care if it's good or finished. I care that you're finding your voice again. Eleanor has become more than a customer. She's become a mentor, pushing me to regain my creative courage with hard-hitting feedback and unexpected encouragement. Through it, I connected with other local business owners in need of design work. My calendar slowly filled up with projects that involved rather than exhausted me, while Gregorio's attempts to contact me became less frequent. The divorce papers I filed through my lawyer were met with a flurry of calls that I did not respond to. Eventually, to his lawyer connected with mine. The process advanced with clinical efficiency. Gregory's initial resistance giving way to resignation. 4 months into my new life, I allow me to check social media. Gregory's profile showed him at a company event smiling. Next to a woman I didn't acknowledge that Richard had posted about Tokyo's expansion, tagging Gregory with proud dad emojis. Amanda shared several photos from a family dinner with the caption, "I don't miss anyone." The confirmation hurt less than I did. I hoped Amanda was right. After all, my disappearance had barely caused a ripple in the Caldwell family's like somehow. This validation did not bring pain, but liberation. I was no longer defined by your perceptions. 6 months after leaving, I received the divorce finalized papers that Gregory signed without contesting the direct division of assets that we negotiated through our lawyers without alimony anyway, a clean division of joint property complete. Separation going forward, the personal communication was a brief note that I still don't understand. But I'm not going to fight with you more. That night I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and cut my hair the long style that Gregory always preferred to a modern bob that framed my face. The woman who looked back looked like familiar and new, thinner, perhaps with faint lines around the eyes, but with a clarity of look that I hadn't seen in years. In month 8, my design business had expanded enough to require a small workspace outside of my apartment. I rented a desk in a co-op creative studio surrounded by other independent artists and entrepreneurs for the first time since college. I had classmates who valued my contribution and challenged my ideas on an equal footing. When the anniversary of as my departure approached, I no longer needed to check social media to know what the Caldwells were doing. Retreated from my daily thoughts, becoming characters in a story I lived. Rather than active presences in my life. Meanwhile, my new world continued expanding. A branding project for a local artisanal food company that won regional recognition. My redesign of Eleanor's cafeteria attracted the attention of a lifestyle magazine. A comment I made during a design workshop led to an invitation to speak at a creative conference. A year after the fateful joke, I was no longer invisible. I had built a life where my presence was not only noticed, but valued, where my voice was heard. Rather than interrupted, where my contributions were recognized instead of being discarded. The challenge was fulfilled, but the story was not yet over. The email from Westwood Creative arrived exactly 52 weeks after the barbecue that changed everything. That was the subject line: innocuous looking designer for national campaign. But the content sent a jolt through my system. Its work to Rainier Artisanal Foods caught our attention. We are developing a campaign for Sheffield consumer brands and believe me, you aesthetics would be perfect for the project's kickoff meeting next week if Sheffield Consumer Brands were interested. A subsidiary of Caldwell Marketing Group, Richard's company. The coincidence seemed I need too much to be accidental. I called Eleanor, who became my sounding board last year. It might be completely legitimate, she reasoned. Later, I explained the connection with which his Rainier campaign was presented in 3 sectors posts. But the moment is suspicious. I finished. The question it is not if they know who you are. Eleanor has said pragmatically that the question is whether it's worth taking the project regardless of whether I requested more information from Westwood. The project was substantial. Redesigning packaging for the entire Sheffield organic line with a potential long-term contract for ongoing brand management. The budget they proposed was double anything I had done since establishing my Seattle business. After 3 more days of deliberation, I accepted. The initial meeting of this was an orchestration of Caldwell. I wanted to confront him directly, rather than wonder if it was legitimate. I didn't want fear of my past to restrict my future. Westwood's creative director. Thomas gave no indication that he knew about my history with the Caldwells during our first meeting where we discussed the design concepts, schedule, expectations, and details of the budget with direct professionalism. When I asked about customer engagement, he only mentioned that Sheffield executives would review key milestones. I accepted the project by setting clear boundaries on communication channels and approval processes for 3 weeks. All proceeded normally. My preliminary designs received positive feedback. The timeline remained on track. No name of Caldwell appeared in any correspondence. Then came the announcement: Sheffield Consumer Brands to be featured at annual inaugural Marketing Innovation Gala. Her organic line renamed as part of the presentation as the main. My participation was highly encouraged. The gala was a major industry event. Exactly the kind of opportunity rebuilding the necessary career was also exactly the kind of role the Caldwells never lost. Richard, considering these networking evenings essential to maintaining the family's business prominence. Gregory had always considered these networking evenings essential to maintaining prominence in the family business. Obediently followed his example. You have 3 options. My therapist noted during our session that we refused to participate and potentially limit your professional growth and tried to avoid the Caldwells, who can be stressful and ultimately futile, or to attend and prepare to engage with them on your terms. What would you do? I asked Dr. Lewis smiled slightly. I am more interested in what Vanessa today would do as opposed to Vanessa a year ago. The question persisted. When I left her, Vanessa from the office last year would have totally refused the event or attended, as apprehensive of Gregory's shadow, fearing Amanda's barbed comments and Patricia's conditional approval. But I was no longer that person. The next morning, I sent an email to Thomas confirming my attendance, so I made an appointment with a personal stylist recommended by Olivia, and booked a part of Sheffield advance payment for an outfit that would serve as armor and announcement. On the night of the gala arrived with an unexpected calm. I examined my reflection in the mirror of the hotel room. The woman looking back wore a tailored jumpsuit in deep emerald that managed to be sophisticated and distinctive in a sea of black dresses. My cropped hair was now accented with subtle caramel highlights. The designer shoes that my only significant splurge added 3 of. Confidence. To my most transformative height, however, was the expression in my eyes, without anxiety, without excuses, just constant readiness for whatever the night may bring to the venue. It was a restored historic theater in the center of the city. Its grand lobby transformed with minimalist, strategic, and floral lighting arrangements. I checked in at the registration desk, accepting my badge and the signature cocktail offered for the circulating wait team. I had barely taken 2 sips when Thomas appeared in my elbow, already introducing myself to a group of industry executives. The business cards disappeared into my clutch as we discussed the emerging design trends and market demographics. I encountered myself speaking with easy authority. My opinions were met with thoughtful nods rather than polite rejection. 40 minutes into the event, I was having a deep conversation with a magazine editor when I felt a shift in the energy of the room. I didn't have to turn around to know that the Caldwell's had reached. Richard's boom laugh confirmed moments later. I maintained my position, ending my point about consumer psychology before I excused myself to visit the bar while waiting for a sparkling water. I carefully as he scanned the room. Richard and Patricia stood near the entrance. Holding court among the admirers, Amanda wasn't immediately visible, and then I saw Gregory standing up a bit in addition to his parents looking thinner than I remembered and somehow diminished, despite their perfect adaptation to our eyes gathered across the crowded space. His unmistakable shocked lips parting a little, as if to speak, despite the distance between us. I held his gaze firmly, without smiling nor frowning. So I deliberately turned my attention to the bartender, thanking him for the first drinking came minutes after Richard approached me while I was surveying the program of the Vanessa event. He said, his tone conveying neither warmth nor hostility. A big surprise, Richard. I shook my head, finding her look directly on the lead designer for Sheffield's organic redesign. He blinked momentarily, disconcerted by my calm demeanor. I have not made the connection to their creativity that is being dealt with externally through Westwood. Yes, I'm working with Thomas's team. The preliminary market tests were very positive. I spoke as I would with any professional and insured executive clients. I see that he seemed to reevaluate me, noting the changes that a year has. Rod, your work has evolved since you left. Unevolved, I corrected with a small smile. Return to your authentic self-direction. Richard changed uncomfortably. Patricia's here somewhere. I'm sure she'd like to say hello. Of course, I replied without encouraging or discouraging the perspective when Richard stepped away, presumably to report his discovery to the family. I returned to the Westwood team, seamlessly integrating into your conversation about the next presentation logistics. Out of the corner of your eye, I could see the ripple effect as Richard spoke to Patricia, whose perfectly maintained composure slipped momentarily as she looked for me in the crowd. The performance in Sheffield was scheduled for the middle of the night. As it was the time approached, Thomas guided me towards the prep area. We were almost there when Amanda walked directly into our path, her expression a complex mixture of surprise and calculation. Vanessa, nobody mentioned that you were involved with this project. Her tone suggested that this oversight was somehow my fault. Amanda, I recognize that I am working with Westwood Creative. Thomas, this is Amanda Caldwell's daughter. Richard. Thomas extended her hand. Mrs. Caldwell, pleasure to meet you. Vanessa has been exceptional to work with. You know her work. Amanda's smile tight. Are we a family actually, or were we? As Thomas replied, no strings attached. Excuse us. We need to prepare for the presentation. As we walk away, Thomas, he looked at me questioningly, but respected my privacy enough not to intrude. I appreciated his professionalism more than he could have known. The presentation itself went on in a focus floor. I spoke on the design philosophy and the Connection with the consumer demonstrated key elements of the rebranding strategy and answered questions with composite experience. The response from the audience was overwhelming positive with several spontaneous rounds of applause from my position on stage. I could see the entire Caldwell family sitting near the front. Patricia kept a neutral expression over time. Richard nodded occasionally at particularly impressive metrics. Amanda whispered something to the woman next to her. Her face unreadable. Gregory watched me with undisguised intensity, your eyes never leaving my face. After formal presentation completed, I was immediately surrounded by participants with questions and compliments. Business cards were exchanged. Potential opportunities mentioned. Connections I established. This professional validation earned entirely on my own merit. It seemed like the sweetest revenge possible. Eventually, the crowd thinned as people moved toward the evening dinner portion. I was gathering my presentation materials when Gregory finally approached. Alone, you look fine. He offered his folded hands awkwardly. In your pockets. Thank you, I replied simply. I didn't know you were in Seattle. That was intentional. He nodded, accepting this truth. His presentation, it was impressive. You were always talented. I am always talented. I corrected gently. Gregory looked down and then up with unexpected frankness. I thought a lot about what happened, about Amanda's joke and everything before I didn't understand it at first, but last year he took a break in search of words, clarifying that I'm glad to hear that I said I miss you. He admitted silently, the words hovered between us, once so desperately desired, but now coming too late. I felt no triumph in his repentance, no vengeful pleasure in his loneliness, just a calm certainty that I had made the right choice. I need to join my team for dinner, I said, neither cruelly nor encouraging. Will you be at tomorrow's workshop? Yes, I'm presenting. The digital integration segment. He nodded again. Maybe we could have coffee afterwards, just to talk. I considered his request, weighing my own emotional scenery that I can spare half an hour. I granted. Relief of professional courtesy flickered on his face. Thank you. As I turned to leave, Patricia appeared on Gregory's elbow, her social smile firmly in place. Vanessa, dear, what an absolute pleasure to see her thriving. The words were perfect. His tone betrayed his discomfort. Patricia, I recognized. I hope you are well. We all miss you at family gatherings. She continued. The lie practiced falling easily from your lips. No one makes strawberry cake like yours. Old Vanessa would do, except at this olive branch. No matter how hypocritical, the new Vanessa held it floor, which is interesting, I replied pleasantly. I remember my cake being relegated to the pantry while Amanda's tiramisu took center stage at the last meeting I attended. From Patricia's smile, he faltered briefly before recovering. A simple misunderstanding, I'm sure. Several simple misunderstandings over 7 years. I agreed to keep my pleasant tone. How lucky that I now work in environments where such misunderstandings rarely occur. Before Patricia could answer, the event coordinator announced the sit-down dinner. I apologized with polite finality, joining Westwood's team at his assigned desk across the room from the Caldwells. For the rest of the evening passed without further direct interaction, though I occasionally caught Gregory watching me from until the event was over. I declined the team's invitation to the after-party drinks, preferring the quiet conclusion of going back to my hotel room alone. In the quiet privacy of my room, I took off my designer shoes and stood at the window overlooking the glittering city. The confrontation I half dreaded for months, they came and went, leaving me not exhausted but strengthened. I faced the Caldwells not as one "I am sorry" challenge. If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice that you had. Precipitated not only mine physical departure, but a complete reinvention. The final irony was that, for example, disappearing from her world, I became more visible on my own the morning after the dawn of the gala, with unexpected sunlight coming in through the curtains of my hotel room. I prepared for the day's workshop with methodical focus, selecting a professional but comfortable outfit and reviewing my presentation notes on room service cafe. Sheffield's marketing workshop was being held in the hotel's conference center, a more intimate setting than the gala the night before. While organizing my materials on the presenter's desk, I caught sight of Richard engaged in an intense conversation with Thomas near the refreshment station. Their discussion looked professional, but not tense. Occasionally, Richard nodded or gestured toward the produce displays. Participants gradually filtered out, networking over pastries and coffee. Before finding seats, I was reviewing my slide deck one last time when Amanda walked in, scanning the room with calculated casualness until her gaze landed on me. After a moment of hesitation, she approached the cup of coffee, clinging to her perhaps too tight "Good morning," she offered, her carefully neutral tone. "Thomas speaks very highly of his work." "Thomas is an excellent creative director," I replied to all of Westwood. "The staff has been exceptional. Amanda has shifted her weight a bit. I didn't know you had settled in Seattle." Her performance last night was stunning, coming from Amanda. The reluctant acknowledgement was practically effusive compliment. I thanked her with simple courtesy, exaggerating the compliment or dismissing it. The father is thinking of bringing up the whole Sheffield story internally after this campaign, she continued to watch me closely. He has been impressed with the direction. I understood the subtext immediately. If Sheffield became a straightforward Caldwell marketing client, my job would disappear, or would your internal team be assigned? The old insecurity blinked briefly before I disbanded it, which would be Richard's prerogative as Sheffield's parent company, I said uniformly. However, Westwood has contractual provisions on creative attribution that are quite specific. Thomas is particularly careful to protect his designer's work. Amanda's expression almost twitching imperceptibly before she could answer. The workshop facilitator asked everyone to take their seats. The conversation ended with mutual professional nods, a far cry from our last interaction with cruel hot dogs. Jokes. The morning sessions proceeded efficiently with presentations on market analysis and consumer demographics. On digital integration strategies was scheduled just before the lunch break. When I went up to podium, I noticed Gregory sliding to the back of the room, clearly having timed his arrival for my presentation. I gave my content with confident experience, demonstrating how packaging designs augmented reality features embedded and seamlessly connected to the digital ecosystem. Question time was later animated with engaged participants and thoughtful discussion when Richard himself asked about implementation timelines. I responded with specific references already agreed with the Sheffield team when the participants stopped for lunch. Gregory made his way in my direction, but was intercepted by a Sheffield executive with urgent questions. I took the opportunity to intervene outside for fresh air that needs a moment away from the gravitational pull of Caldwell. The hotel's courtyard garden. Since a quiet respite, I had just sat on a bench when Patricia appeared, in the way her expression suggesting that our meeting was not accidental. You always had an excellent time to it. Escapes that she watched. Smoothing her skirt while sitting next to me uninvited. I prefer to call it recognize when I need space, I replied. Patricia studied me with new attention. You changed. I reverted. I corrected to the person I was before me, started trying to fit into spaces that weren't designed for me. She sighed lightly. Families are complicated, Vanessa, especially established ones like ours. There are expectations, traditions, ways in which things have always been done. I am aware that he spent 7 years observing these traditions, 7 years trying to live up to them. Expectations, maybe we haven't always been as welcoming as we could have been. Patricia admitted the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from her. But disappearing without a word was quite dramatic. Don't you think? I turned to face her directly. I left a detailed letter to Gregory. The first ensured that all financial obligations were properly. I dealt with it. I made a clear adult decision to withdraw from a situation that had become detrimental to my well-being. There was nothing dramatic about it. Gregory was devastated. She hit back at Gregory, bothered. I corrected gently. There is a difference. Patricia perfectly preserved. Facade cracked slightly. You have no idea what this past year has been like for him, for all of us. You're right, I recognized it just like you. I have no idea what the previous 7 years were like for me. We were tense silence for a moment before continuing. But I'm not interested in swapping pain. Metrics, Patricia. That's not why I'm here. I am because I am good at what I do and my work has value to Sheffield's. Something has changed in Patricia's expression. Not much respect, but maybe a new awareness that you've always been stubborn, determined. I countered with a little smile. Another noteworthy distinction. As we returned to the conference center, Patricia asked an unexpected question. Will you be at the closing dinner tonight? Yes, Westwood has a table. She nodded thoughtfully. Salmon is usually excellent. It was so normal worldly observation that gentle mothers-in-law usually share with daughters-in-law who momentarily disoriented. I murmured in agreement as we returned to the workshop, separating to our respective tables. The afternoon sessions focused on the implementation strategies I participated in actively, but kept a professional distance. Neither seeking out nor avoiding the Caldwells. When the workshop concluded, Gregory finally managed to approach me directly. Are you ready for coffee yet? He asked, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. Yes, I agreed. There's a store in the lobby. We walked together in silence, the familiarity of his presence by my side strange and nostalgic. Once sitting with our drinks his usual American and my latte requested, no need for discussion. The embarrassment stepped up. Seattle suits you. He finally offered that I agreed to the creative community has received. Gregory traced the rim of his cup in which I stood. Therapy since you left. Daddy thought it was unnecessary, but he shrugged it off. Yes, it was helpful. It surprised me. Gregory always. Dismiss therapy as payment. Someone to tell you what you want here. I'm glad. I sincerely said mine therapist helped me understand some things about our marriage, about my family. He met my eyes directly about how I couldn't see what was happening to you because it was easier not. The recognition was unexpected and disarming for a moment. I glimpsed the man I had fallen in love with, thoughtfully able to grow up, willing to examine myself. Thank you for saying that. I replied quietly. I didn't. Defend you. He continued, not against Amanda, not against mommy, not even against my own expectations that you would just fit in for whatever the family needed. No, you didn't. I confirmed without rancor that I thought a lot about that barbecue. Amanda's joke and how everyone laughed. As I laughed, he swallowed hard. I keep thinking about what you said, dear. I don't understand then what you meant, and now I realize that you were declaring independence from all of us. His voice had equal parts admiration, and I regret that we talked for almost an hour longer than the half hour that I allocated. Gregory shared how family dynamics have changed in my absence from Amanda, mounting criticism extending to his new girlfriend Patricia's ever-increasing control over Richard's family gatherings, disappointment when Gregory turned down a promotion that would have required the change. I'm seeing everything differently. He explained as if someone adjusted the contrast on a photo I've been looking at all my life. When our empty coffee cups, we both recognized the natural conclusion of our conversation. As we get up to leave, Gregory asked the question I had hoped if there was any chance for us, not right away, but eventually. I considered his face, once the center of my world. I felt affection, compassion, even a whisper of the old attraction. But the rope had been cut not only by Amanda's joke or my departure, but in the year of growth that followed. I think both of us, I needed to become different people. I said kindly, and I like who I'm becoming now. He nodded, accepting this truth with an astonishing grace. You always have been stronger than I gave. You credit for we were. I corrected, you just needed different circumstances to discover it. We parted with a brief platonic embrace that felt like a fitting closure. As I watched he left, I realized that I really wished him good luck in building a life that was authentically his. Not just an extension of Caldwell's legacy. The final confrontation came unexpectedly while I was collecting my conference room portfolio. Amanda came in just as I was preparing to leave, her purposeful steps suggesting that she was waiting for this opportunity to catch me alone. I need to ask you something, she said without preamble, and I would appreciate an honest answer. All right, I agreed. Curious, in spite of me, you accepted this project knowing that it was connected to our family? No, I answered truthfully. I found out about the Sheffield Caldwell connection later, accepting Westwood's offer. By then the contract was signed. She studied me, apparently evaluating the truth of my statement, and you didn't think too. Refuse yourself. Once you knew why, I simply asked, am I extremely good at what I do? Amanda, this project needed someone with exactly my skills and aesthetic sensibility. The fact that her family company can benefit from my work is incidental to my professional bonds. So it's just coincidence that exactly 1 year after you disappear, you reappear working on a project linked to us. I had to smile at your persistence. Life rarely organizes with such perfect symmetry. But yes, essentially, I don't. Believe in coincidences, so convenient that she countered. What would be the alternative explanation? That I asked that I orchestrated an elaborate 1 year plan, building a whole new career in another city, establish relationships with agencies not connected to your family, culminating in this particular project that would give you a lot more space in my thoughts than it actually was the case. Of the blunt assessment landed visibly. Amanda winked, perhaps at the first time, considering that she may not have been central to my decisions at the barbecue. She said after a pause, when I made that joke, it was just a joke. I never thought you really leaving wasn't just a joke, Amanda. It was the articulation of something you. I had been expendable, forgettable, unimportant for years. I kept my tone colloquial instead of accusatory, and you weren't wrong in a way. In the context of your family, I was. These things I needed to figure out was that there are contexts in which I'm not. Amanda's composure slipped. Momentarily revealing something rarely seen: uncertainty. Gregory has not been the same since you left. Gregory is finding his own way. I have answered as I am, and there is no chance of reconciliation. The issue seemed motivated by family concerns and not by genuine care by Gregory or myself. We reconcile in the only way we can. Subjects. I said that we both recognized the truth of our marriage and found peace with its end. Amanda nodded her head, slowly absorbing that purpose as she turned to leave. She stopped in the doorway. Your presentation yesterday was a genuinely good job. I would have said that regardless of who you were coming from, Amanda. This professional recognition represented a fundamental change. I thanked him with simple sincerity, without overvaluing the praise or dismissing him. As I left the hotel to get ready for the closing dinner of the night, I felt a strange lightness that I faced each Caldwell, navigating individually these encounters, not as last year's insecure. Outsider, but as a confident professional with clear boundaries. Family that once seemed so big in my life now seemed adequately proportioned, just people with their own limitations and complexities. The final dinner that the night unfolded with surprising ease. The Caldwells and the Westwood crew were sitting at separate desks, creating natural distance without obviously avoiding. When colleagues in the industry introduced me to Richard as the designer behind Sheffield's brilliant rebranding, he recognized my work with professionals' courtesy. When Patricia complimented my dress during a chance date at the dessert station, I graciously accepted. More revealing when Amanda's presentation on upcoming marketing trends included a slide with one of my projects with due attribution. I recognize him for what he was: an audience professional recognition that would have been unthinkable a year ago. When the night ended, I exchanged contact information with several potential customers. Confirmed. the next steps with Thomas, and he said goodbye to the industry colleagues that Gregory approached briefly, simply wishing me a good trip and good luck with a sincerity that needed no elaboration. Leaving the place, I didn't feel any dramatic sense of triumph or closure. Instead, I experienced silence, satisfaction of having regained not only my professional identity, but my personal sovereignty. The Caldwells were now simply people I knew intimately and who now occupied an appropriate space in my past, rather than outsized meaning in my current challenge of Amanda. If you disappear tomorrow, don't one would even notice that it was not only accepted, but transcended. What I had disappeared from your world only to reappear transformed into my own a month after the marketing conference. I sat across from Eleanor at our regular corner table in her Seattle coffee shop. The rain gently hit the windows, creating a cozy backdrop for our conversation. So the Sheffield campaign officially launches. Next week, Eleanor noted, refill my cup with the pottery pot between us. That should feel satisfying after all it does. I agreed. Thomas called yesterday to say that the retailer's initial response was overwhelmingly positive, that they are already discussing extending the rebranding to additional product lines and the Caldwell connection. I considered the issue thoughtfully. It became professionally cordial that Richard's marketing director reached out over potentially collaboration on future. Projects through appropriate channels with clear contracts. I haven't decided if you're going to pursue it. That's quite an evolution, Eleanor observed. From the outcast family to the professional resource sought, life has interesting symmetries. Sometimes I recognized with a small smile that the truth was Sheffield project marked a turning point in my career. The visibility of the campaign attracted the attention of others' potential clients. My portfolio now included work that reflected my authentic design voice. Rather than most important watered-down commitments, I addressed each opportunity with clarity, limits, and confidence in my worth. The divorce was finalized with surprising softness. Gregory fair in the financial settlement, even generous in certain aspects. We did not maintain direct contact, but our respective attorneys reported professional cooperation throughout the process. Just a personal request, keeping my original engagement ring that belonged to my grandmother instead. Of the Caldwell family diamond that Gregory later insisted I update was granted without argument. My regular therapy sessions with Dr. Lewis continued. Although we had reduced the frequency of weekly for fortnightly, our conversations evolved from acute emotional processing trauma to explore healthier patterns for future and ongoing relationships. Self-discovery. The interesting thing about healing that Dr. Lewis noted in our last session is that it is rarely a returning to one's previous state, is a transformation into something new that embodies the experience without being defined by him. This observation resonated deeply as I navigated my rebuilt life. I wasn't trying to recapture who I'd been before I met Gregory. I was integrating the passion and confidence of this younger self with the wisdom and limits conquered. With a lot of effort, difficulty, Jessica visited Seattle for a long weekend. Marveling at the changes in both my external circumstances and inner landscape. You laugh differently now that she observed it during a walk. Discovery Park. More of your belly, less of your throat, which is oddly specific. I teased but precise. She insisted that you used to laugh like someone who needed it permission. Now you laugh like someone who is giving yourself permission to these subtle transformations accumulated gradually. I found myself speaking in creative meetings without rehearsing my thoughts. First, I started casually dating, nothing serious yet, but enjoying the simple pleasure of connecting with interesting people without the need for immediate definition. He joined a community garden and discovered an unexpected joy in cultivating a tangible life. An unexpected development came in the form of a friendship with Charlotte's wife, Michael, which she reached out via professional email ostensibly to inquire about design services for a pediatrician clinic she volunteered with. Our initial coffee meeting evolved into genuine connection based on shared experiences as Caldwell outsiders and mutual professional respect. Amanda is really taking parenting lessons. Charlotte revealed during one of our lunch meetings that she is pregnant and determined not to repeat family patterns. The news, I was surprised not only by the pregnancy, but by Amanda's self-awareness that she is encouraging people to change when properly motivated, noted Charlotte. The family dynamic changed after you left. It made visible some things that had been conveniently ignored. If my was it a catalyst or mere coincidence? I didn't get any particular credit for these evolutions of Caldwell's journey was theirs. Just like mine was mine. 6 weeks after marketing conference, I was selecting produce at a farmer's market when I heard a family member voice. Amanda was in the next stall examining artisanal cheese. Her pregnancy was visible now, creating a softer silhouette against its typically tailored look. That our eyes found mutual recognition after a moment of hesitation. She approached Vanessa. I didn't know you bought here every Saturday. I confirmed that they have the best traditional tomatoes in town. The awkwardness between us was palpable, but not hostile. We exchanged brief pleasantries about the market time, the next product launch. So Amanda surprised me with unexpected frankness. I've been thinking about what you said at the conference about contexts in which you're expendable versus valued. She adjusted her bag uncomfortably. I'm discovering something similar in preparation for motherhood. Everybody's got advice on who I should become, how I should change. Yes, enlightening contexts shape us. I recognized, but they don't need to define us. Amanda nodded thoughtfully. The parenting class Charlotte probably told you about this is helping me recognize some patterns, things that I never questioned because they were normal in our family. I heard the tacit comparison with my own journey of recognition and self-awareness of separation is powerful. I offered yes. She hesitated, then added with unusual vulnerability, I don't want my child to feel like he needs to disappear in order to. It will be seen that the admission revealed a deeper reflection than I would have credited to Amanda a year ago, that I did not offer easy absolution. Our story was too complex for that. But I offered simple human recognition. That's a good place to start. We parted ways without any drama. Reconciliation with no promises of future connection, just a moment of genuine communication between two adults sharing a brief intersection in life's journey. Returning home with my groceries at the market, I reflected on the strange trajectory that brought me from Caldwell Barbecue until the present moment. The challenge that Amanda, without knowing it, had set itself. You disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice, had in fact been the catalyst for a profound transformation. I had disappeared from a life where I was diminished only to reappear in one where I was valued. I had lost a family, that I demanded my conformity just to build a community that celebrated my authenticity. I had abandoned security that came with the compromise. Embracing the uncertain adventure of self-determination. Last week I had locked in a small house near the water, nothing big for Caldwell's standards, but perfectly suited to my needs, and purchased entirely at my own gains, for I arranged my furniture and hung artwork selected. Exclusively for my own pleasure, I experienced a deep sense of having created not just a home, but a life genuinely mine. The greatest irony of Amanda's cruel joke was that disappearing made me disappear, more visible than ever to colleagues who valued my creativity, to friends who appreciated my authentic me, and most importantly for myself. The challenge was not only accepted, but transformed into an unexpected gift. That night, like the Seattle skyline, I opened my journal and wrote down the reflection that was forming for months. Sometimes we must disappear from the narratives of others to discover our. The most powerful answer to being invisible is not to demand vision from blind eyes, but finding the context where our true self is not only visible, but celebrated. The opposite of disappearing is not being noticed. It is becoming so much so that external validation becomes unnecessary. To the woman who had created a hot dog on defiant toast a year ago, never could have imagined the journey ahead. The woman who writes these words, she could never go back to who she had been, and in this transformation there was no tragedy but triumph. Silence, sustainable victory of reclaiming your life. Have you ever had a moment when someone's cruel words really pushed you to make a life-changing decision? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If it resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to hear that sometimes walking away is the strongest. Movement you can make. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remembering its value is never determined by those who cannot see it.